When the frontier pushed west, the U.S. didn't just gain towns and rail lines. From 1850 to 1910, broken treaties, land rushes, Indian wars, mines, railroads, and cattle barons changed real life and turned into saloon stories. In this video, 50 archival pieces and expert commentary show what got left out of the script. There's stuff in there we don't learn in school, but it explains a lot about today. Number 1. In Rawlins, Wyoming, in 1881, the outlaw Big Nose George Parrott was lynched from a telegraph pole. Afterward, the doctors John Eugene Osborne and Thomas Magee kept the body to study the brain and try to find the root of crime. The skin was turned into boots and a medical bag that Osborne used at his inauguration as governor. The top of the skull ended up with the young Lillian Heath, used as an ashtray and a doorstop. Number 2. In the mid-1850s, the Scotsman Allan Pinkerton started a private agency in the U.S. that became the gold standard. He put together files with descriptions, photos, and aliases, linked offices by telegraph, and planted informants. That way of running case files basically turned into a playbook for the government. Under pressure from Jesse James, the James Younger gang went into hiding. Later, those same guys did security for politicians and big shots, laying down the rules. Number 3. In the Old West, John Wesley Hardin claimed he'd killed 42 men, and a lot of people believed him. In 1871, at a hotel in Abilene, Kansas, after gambling and whiskey, he lost it over his neighbor, Charles Cowger, snoring and fired through the wall. In jail, he studied law and got out trying to live as a lawyer. But in El Paso, on the night of August 19, 1895, John Selman Sr. came up behind him at the Acme Saloon and put an end to the story. Number 4. In 1872, when everyone was still dreaming of striking it rich out west, Philip Arnold and John Slack swore they had a secret spot for precious stones in what was then the Wyoming Territory, near Colorado. On guided visits, the gems seemed to pop right out of the ground, and bankers and politicians rushed to buy shares. But the geologist Clarence King checked the samples. Fresh cuts, a weird mix, and zero natural signs. The party ended right there. Classic, too good to be true. Number 5. Where the Clear Fork of the Brazos cuts through, Fort Griffin started out as an army post and soon became a key stop on the Texas frontier. Cattle drives, buffalo hides, and easy money rolled through. Between one ranch and the next, folks packed the saloons. You hear stories of high-stakes gambling, gunshots in the middle of the night, and people who showed up without a name and left the same way. That's why it got the label Babylon on the Brazos. John Wesley Hardin, Doc Holliday, and Big Nose Kate are on that list. Number 6. Born into slavery, Bass Reeves escaped in the chaos of the Civil War and hid out in Indian Territory. There he became a local, learned the languages of different nations, and mapped trails and rivers. Years later, Washington appointed him a U.S. deputy marshal west of the Mississippi, the first black man in the job. Under Judge Isaac Parker, he made thousands of arrests. There are accounts that he'd go in alone, with a warrant in his pocket, and bring the prisoner back without making a scene, helping shape Old West legends like the Lone Ranger. Number 7. Black Bart, real name Charles Earl Bowles, arrived in New York as a kid and hit the road when the 1849 gold rush pulled half the country to California. Years later, tired of hard labor, he became Wells Fargo's polite stagecoach robber. A flour sack mask, a shotgun, they say it was unloaded, a short note, and a poem at the end. He pulled off 28 robberies up to 1883. A handkerchief with a laundry mark gave him away. He got out, disappeared, and nobody really knows where he ended up. Number 8. When the family fell apart, Martha Jane Canary was still a girl and ended up bouncing around the West the old-timers called the frontier. To put food on the table, she rode with cattle drives, picked up odd jobs at mining camps, and learned how to deal with soldiers and saloon owners. Some folks swore she saved people and nursed the sick. Others said it was just newspaper talk. When dime novels and Wild West shows came along, her name became currency. That's how the legend was born. Calamity Jane. Fact or marketing? Number 9. On the Old West frontier, firewater was part of the game. At trading posts, near reservations, and in saloons, some traders put on a show. They'd pour a thin stream of the drink onto the coals and let the flame prove how strong it was. There was no standard to the mix. Raw alcohol, burnt molasses, and chewing tobacco. Sometimes it was even cut with water and sugar. One swig showed why it worked as currency. It sealed deals for hides, ammo, and bought silence until morning. Number 10. In the winter of 1874, the prospector Alfred G. Packer left the Rockies with 5 other guys headed for Colorado, and weeks later showed up alone. He said things went wrong and dodged the details. When the bodies were found near Lake City, there were signs of gunshots, knives, and flesh cut away. Packer swore it was self-defense and hunger. The court didn't buy it and convicted him. Years later, he changed his story, and the case became legend in newspapers, books, and movies. To this day, crime or survival? Number 11. In 1911, in a shootout with the cops in Pawhuska, Oklahoma, the outlaw Elmer J. McCurdy died and nobody showed up to claim the body. The owner of the funeral home kept him standing in the parlor with a rifle, charging a nickel to take a look. After that, he turned into a carnival and wax museum piece, bounced around storage in Los Angeles, and ended up at a park in Long Beach. In 1976, on a TV set, the crew found out he was real. In 1977, he was buried in Guthrie, with concrete poured over the grave. Number 12. One night in 1866 in Indiana, brothers John and Simeon Reno pulled something that became the talk of the town, from the station to the saloon. They stopped an Ohio and Mississippi Railroad train and went straight for the safe. They made off with close to $13,000, money that back then could buy real land. They studied schedules and stretches of track like it was homework. The news spread, and from then on, Jesse James and others copied the Reno way, which ended up becoming a Western movie script. Number 13. In the American West after the Civil War, Jesse James became a headline name, but a lot of people said Frank, the older brother, was the one thinking through every move. In the James Younger gang, they hit banks and trains and rode off on horseback, leaving widows and fear behind. In 1882, Jesse was killed by a former partner. Frank went to the governor of Missouri, handed over his gun, and faced the courts. He was acquitted, lived off odd jobs, even in a Wild West show, and died in 1915. The funny thing is, plenty of people paid just to shake his hand. Number 14. Wyoming, 1892, in the Old West. The cattle big shots thought the small ranchers were taking what belonged to them. They made a list of thieves, hired gunmen, and crossed the county like they were the law. There was an ambush, a cabin surrounded and burned, and people killed without a trial. Only when federal troops showed up did it stop. afterward, almost nobody got convicted. The Johnson County War. When money tries to write the rules, who's got the regular guys back? Number 15. In the late 1800s, James "Killer" Miller, known as Deacon Jim, kept drifting around the West, sometimes as a hired gun, sometimes as a churchman. People said he had 14 killings on his hands, plus a bunch more as side work, and even that he might have pulled the trigger on Pat Garrett. He didn't drink or smoke and helped out at Methodist services. Sober as could be, he wore a steel plate on his chest and once walked away from 4 gunshots. In 1909, a mob hanged him in Ada, Oklahoma, and the legend ended right there. Number 16. Before 1870, a lot of land out west was open range. Cattle ran loose, brands got mixed up, and the small rancher lived scared his herd would disappear into the big neighbor's stock. In 1874, Illinois farmer Joseph Glidden patented barbed wire. The cheap fence changed the game. It blocked the routes of the long Texas drives, sparked fence-cutting fights, and gave landowners new power over water and grazing. In just a few years, the horizon turned into a grid, and even the sheriff got pulled into it. Number 17. In 1870, in northern New Mexico, on the Taos Trail between Taos and Elizabethtown, Charles Kennedy ran an isolated rest stop. It was a route for cowboys and prospectors. A traveler came in to eat. The son whispered that his father was going to finish the job. The shot rang out, and the boy was killed to keep him quiet. After that, Kennedy made it his method. He'd take in folks, rob them, and bury or burn the bodies. The turning point comes when Rosa, his Ute wife, decides to tell everything. From there on, it's court and a rope. Number 18. In the late 1800s, in Indian Territory, the papers were always talking about Belle Starr, born Myra Maybelle Shirley. She married Jim Reed and later the Cherokee Sam Starr, and ended up running with crews of horse thieves and smugglers, always dodging the lawmen. When she showed up in court, the headlines made more noise than the judge, and people talked about it in the saloon. They even said she had ties to the James brothers. In 1889, she was taken out in an ambush. Nobody got arrested, and the mystery only made her more famous. Number 19. In the 1870s in Kansas, a family named the Benders ran a little roadside motel where dinner came with conversation. Travelers vanished, and the talk spread around the county. Some said spiritualism, others said a scam. When neighbors and the sheriff went in, they found a trap door in the floor, sledgehammer marks, and graves near the orchard. The weirdest part is the Benders had already skipped town, and to this day some people swear they spotted Kate years later in another state. Number 20. In 1895, out in rural Montana, Mary Fields, known as Stagecoach Mary, took on a mail route when almost nobody could stomach the idea of a black woman in charge. She rode armed, drove the stagecoach, and no matter if it was rain, mud, or a blizzard, she got there. When the road closed, she opened it, cleared the trail, and crossed icy rivers on foot. People figured it out fast. Without her, letters, newspapers, and medicine didn't show up. In a country that wanted to push her to the side, she kept the mail moving. Number 21. In the Old West, at a card table, the rule was simple: back to the wall and an eye on the door. In 1876, in Deadwood, Dakota Territory, Wild Bill Hickok, James Butler Hickok, walked into Nuttall and Mann's saloon. The place was packed and the safe corner was already taken. He sat in a chair that left his back exposed. The front door seemed covered, but Jack McCall came in through the back and fired point blank. They say Hickok went down with 2 aces and 2 eights in his hand, and that hand became legend. Number 22. In the 1870s, Bawdy, California, became a must-stop of the gold rush. In no time, Main Street filled up with saloons, gambling, and people chasing the big score. It had a newspaper, a school, a line at the post office, and dust stuck to everybody's boots. Then the tide turned, fires, mines shutting down, and families moving out. The place got frozen in the Old West. Visitors swear they hear footsteps and see shadows in the saloon, and the old-timers warn, take a souvenir from there and it's bad luck until you bring it back. Number 23. By the late 1870s, Mary Catherine Horney, Big Nose Kate, sometimes called Arizona Kate, had already been through a rough start and came from Hungary to the frontier. In Texas saloons, she became a dancer and did whatever work paid. That's where she met Doc Holliday, who made his living playing cards. When he landed in jail and a mob wanted to deal out justice the hard way, Kate set a shed on fire, pulled a gun, and cleared the way for a horseback escape toward Kansas, and she kept going without apologizing. Number 24. Tombstone, Arizona, October 26, 1881. The town was split. The Cowboys with Sheriff Johnny Behan. On the other side, Wyatt, Virgil, and Morgan Earp with Doc Holliday. In less than 30 seconds at the OK Corral, the gunfire became national news. After that came the justice of the peace hearing, nights of ambushes, and people packing heat even just to grab a coffee. Morgan was killed in a saloon. Wyatt hit back on the so-called vendetta ride, and the line between law and payback disappeared for good. Number 25. In the 19th century American West, a bandana was as common as a hat and a holster. On cattle drives, it worked as a dust filter and folded up, protected your neck from the sun. Around camp, it helped you grab a hot lid or serve as a makeshift cloth. At night, it went over your ears in the cold. With a knot, it could cover your face and hide anyone who didn't want to be seen on Main Street. By the way it was tied, you could tell if someone was a cowboy, a miner, or somebody riding with a gang. Number 26. In July 1881, in Fort Sumner, New Mexico, Sheriff Pat Garrett found Billy the Kid, William H. Bonney, in a dark room and shot him. Historian Robert M. Utley backs that version. At 21, Billy was coming out of the Lincoln County War and had a bounty on his head. Garrett later published his account. To this day, a lot of people stop by just to see where the story turned into legend. In the cemetery, the headstone was stolen twice and is now chained down. And the talk still goes on. Real ending, or did he get away? Number 27. In the late 1800s, Alice Ivers left the United Kingdom, spent time in a boarding school, and ended up in a Colorado boomtown. Between worn-out miners and passing gunmen, she learned poker and how to handle herself, earning the nickname Poker Alice. She worked in Creed at Bob Ford's saloon, the guy who killed Jesse James. Once, she won $6,000 in a single night, real money. In 1910, a confrontation in her own saloon ended with a soldier dead and her in jail, closing out a chapter of the Old West. Number 28. In the Superstition Mountains near Apache Junction, AZ, there's a legend that just won't die. In the late 1800s, Jacob Waltz, a German nicknamed the Dutchman, from Deutsch, supposedly pulled gold from a spot he took to the grave in 1891. After that, the newspapers spread the story, and every generation came back to try again. Treasure hunters followed scribbled maps, fake trails, and brutal canyons. A lot of people swear the range makes you pay. Disappearances, falls, and lights in the night. And even so, the big score still calls. Number 29. Born in Canada, Pearl Hart saw Buffalo Bill's show and, instead of going back home, hit the road to Arizona. Still a teenager, she got tangled up in a bad marriage and soon ended up in the hard life of the frontier. In 1899, she and her partner Joe Boot forced a stagecoach to pull over. Then they got the route wrong in the desert and were caught. In court, the room was packed, and she became bar talk. She served about 18 months and got out early because the system didn't even know where to put a woman like that. Number 30. In frontier towns, the saloon was the center of the conversation. Whiskey at the bar, dust on your boots, and bets on the table. Canada Bill Jones made his living off three-card Monte, the classic three-card scam. He'd strike up a chat, get you to wager, and before you knew it, the hustle had taken your money. People said out west, money you hand to a cheat only comes back if you know how to take it back. Doc Holliday ran that circuit too. One move could change everything, and plenty of folks walked away with a story and no cash. Number 31. In 1860, before the telegraph really spread everywhere, the Pony Express connected St. Joseph, Missouri to Sacramento, California. It was almost 350 kilometers done the hard way. Riders, many under 20, swapped horses every 10-15 miles at stations in the middle of nowhere and passed the baton day and night. Letters got there in about 10 days. No joke. The numbers didn't add up. In 18 months, it burned almost $110,000, and the telegraph line took over. But it left a speed standard that changed the game. Number 32. Out west, when the railroad rerouted or the mine shut down, the town shriveled up. In that squeeze, hustlers showed up promising to reopen the lode and offering shares to a select few. They'd flash showroom nuggets, name-drop some supposed geologist, and hit you with, "Now or never." Afraid of missing out, a line would form, and a lot of people put down the deposit, sometimes their life savings. Then the guys vanished. With no sheriff and no rules, they'd come back later with a crumpled map and a saloon rumor, and the scam would run all over again. Number 33. In 1856, the U.S. Army ran a test that sounds straight out of a Western. They used camels to haul cargo across the deserts of Texas and the Southwest. The idea came after seeing how they worked in the Middle East. Secretary Jefferson Davis backed buying 74 animals kept at Camp Verde. They handled thirst and distance better than mules, but the soldiers didn't like their attitude. The Civil War shut the plan down, and years later, people were still reporting camels roaming the trails. Number 34. Crawford Goldsby, known as Cherokee Bill, was born on February 8, 1876 in Texas, the son of a black soldier and a freed Cherokee woman. Still young, in Indian Territory, now Oklahoma, he fell into robbing stores and stagecoaches, bouncing between saloons and trails. Hunted by federal marshals, he tried to break out of jail and killed a guard. Tried in Fort Smith by Judge Isaac Parker, he was hanged on March 17, 1896 at 20, saying he wasn't there to make a speech. Number 35. On the plains of North America, some indigenous groups took scalps as proof of victory and status. As the frontier advanced and the push west sped up, settlers and militias also adopted the practice to spread fear and mark territory. In some periods, governments even paid bounties for scalps, turning violence into a receipt. In the 19th century, during the Civil War, it showed up in guerrilla raids. William T. Bloody Bill Anderson in Missouri and Kansas became a reference point. Number 36. In 1890, in Tombstone, Arizona, when the town was already trying to move past the Old West, two hunters said they'd shot down a huge winged creature. The story spread through the saloons and over the telegraph. The Tombstone epitaph mentioned a body stretched out in a barn and a photo that would prove it all. But the image never turned up. No negative, no clipping, no archive. Some locals swore they saw it. Others said it was a newspaper stunt. And that's how the myth was born. Where's that photo? Number 37. When a storm's electricity loads up the air, St. Elmo's fire can show up, a discharge that makes the tips of masts, fences, and even tools glow. Sailors in the 18th century saw it on deck and took it as a sign of good luck before crossing the Atlantic. Decades later, out on the Great Plains, old-timers said that same glow jumped to cattle horns and horse ears. Nobody laughed. It was the kind of warning that made even outlaws lower their voices and respect the sky. Number 38. Out west in the 19th century, Charlie Parkhurst became a stagecoach driver in California, always with a low hat and a tough attitude, passing as a man to get the job. Charlie took on mud, dust, and bad roads, and when a holdup went down, didn't let go of the reins, kept the rig steady, and got folks out of trouble. Only after Charlie died in 1879 did the shock come out. Charlie was a woman and may have voted. To this day, in saloons and in the archives, the question sticks. What ran the show, the road or the courage? Number 39. When you think of the Old West, movies usually sell you a ranch full of white men on horseback. But payroll sheets and travel accounts tell a different story. A lot of black people doing the hard work, something like 1 in every 4. They drove cattle for weeks, shod horses, branded stock, broke broncs, and went to rodeos. During the Civil War, with bosses away, they kept the ranches running. After freedom, they became the backbone of communities in Texas and beyond. For decades. Number 40. In the winter of 1886-87, the cold hit the Great Plains without warning. Ranching was booming, with money from the east, and even England flooding the range with cattle. Then the snow crusted into ice, the wind wiped out trails, and the animals couldn't reach grass or water. In spring, cowboys found bones in the ravines. A lot of ranches went under overnight, and the ones that made it learned to count winter as a cost. The great die-up ended the open range. Barbed wire, hay, and shelter became the rule. Number 41. In the American West, a bounty hunter only got paid when they delivered the wanted man to the sheriff. For a long time, the proof was the body, dragged miles back to town. Over time, sheriffs and judges started accepting a studio portrait taken by the local photographer. It was faster and kept you from traveling with a dead man in the heat. Sometimes, someone hidden behind the backdrop would hold the body up so he'd look alive. The photo became the receipt, and the hunter would catch the next train or horse. Number 42. Sometime in the late 1800s, ranchers near Marfa in West Texas started noticing stubborn lights on the horizon. They flicker on and off and move across the desert like someone's driving in the dark. People have said it's car headlights, a mirage, gas, even military testing. Even folks from the University of Texas looked into it, and it still didn't add up. On a clear night, people go to the viewpoint, stay quiet, and wait for the show. And when the lights appear, everyone wonders, what is it really? Number 43. In Dodge City, Kansas, The Long Branch was the kind of saloon where everyone ran into everyone. Cowboys coming off the cattle drives, gamblers, armed men, and the marshal trying to keep a lid on things. They say it started from a bet on a ball game, with soldiers footing the bill for the lumber. On April 5, 1879, Frank Loving killed Levi Richardson there. In 1885, a fire wiped out Front Street. When the railroad took over, the town changed. Today, the replica at the Boot Hill Museum lets you feel what it was like back in the day. Number 44. By the late 1800s, the West was a promise of money and work on the railroads. Li Wen, like so many others, left southern China and took on 14-hour days in canvas camps with little food, little money at the end of the month, and a lot of "you don't belong here." Up in the Sierra, he cut through rock and dug tunnels on the transcontinental. On some stretches, almost everyone spoke Cantonese. When the job dried up, the fight moved to San Francisco and Seattle, in laundries and kitchens. The 1882 law shut doors for decades. Number 45. Tatanka Ayotake, Sitting Bull, was a Hunkpapa Lakota leader in the 19th century. To him, the land and the buffalo had their own law, and the government had to respect it. After Little Bighorn, he crossed the border and stayed in Canada to escape the army. When he came back, he surrendered and was taken to the Standing Rock Reservation. In 1885, he agreed to join Buffalo Bill's Wild West for 4 months, went to Europe, signed cards for coins, and quit the tour. In 1890, amid fear around the ghost dance, he was killed by Indian police. Number 46. William Buffalo Bill. Cody figured out early that the frontier sold. He took his stories as a scout and hunter and built a big traveling show, cowboys roping, horses at full speed, and staged attack and defense scenes with Native Americans, including Sitting Bull. In every town, the newspapers helped turn myth into fact. He toured the U.S., crossed the Atlantic, and even Queen Victoria went to see it. The fame grew, but more and more people started asking, was this history or a business built on native cultures? Number 47. In the American West, a lot of towns were almost all men. In some places, it was like 9 guys for every woman. In boom towns and mining camps, that changed daily life. To keep customers around, saloons paid dance hall girls and hostesses to sing, dance, and make conversation at the tables. People were quick with labels, but plenty of them lived off the stage and the talk, saved tips, and sometimes bought a house or land, becoming familiar names on the street and in church, in a place that was hard as hell. Number 48. In the Old West, some outlaws left a pretty blunt request in their will, to be buried with their 6-shooter, a deck of poker cards, and a bottle of whiskey. For them, that helped with the crossing and kept their name alive. Years later, tourists said the deck still warmed up in your hand. Curiosity turned into business, relic hunting took off, and even graves got dug up. Meanwhile, the West kept rolling on with rail lines, immigrants, homesteads, quiet scams, and the stories of native folks. Number 49. Geronimo was born in what's now Arizona, back when it was part of Mexico. While still young, he became an Apache leader and got pulled into a long war against Mexicans and later the U.S. Army, staying on the run from the reservations. In 1886, he surrendered and was taken to Fort Sill, Oklahoma. Baptized, he became a famous prisoner. He went to fairs, posed for photos, and sold crafts and pictures of himself. He even rode in Theodore Roosevelt's inauguration parade in 1905. In the end, the question remains, who controlled the story, him or the government?